Hello and welcome to Region Locked. This episode is going to be a little bit different from normal, telling a rather sad story and presenting a call to arms for anybody willing or capable of helping. As a participant of game preservation, we feel the situation needs more attention. The games we're covering in this episode encompass a wide range of interests, and all of them are at threat of disappearing permanently in the not too distant future if there isn't an active effort to preserve them. These days, when people talk about the mobile gaming market, it's all fairly predictable.
You guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
The birth of the smartphone led to everybody seeing their mobile device as a multimedia tool, ripe for casual audiences to use voice communication, email, browse the internet, watch video content, listen to music, and of course, play video games. But it isn't as though mobile phones didn't have games before they became smart. The platform was full of titles, though they were mostly made up of fairly uninspired titles with poor controls, typically programmed in Java. Or it was Snake. However, this wasn't the case in Japan. Since 1999, Japan has enjoyed a rich ecosystem of so-called feature phones, devices somewhere between your brick Nokia and your modern-day smartphone. These phones hosted games from a huge number of franchises, some original and some from popular culture, but also many from the wider gaming market itself. These games weren't distributed in a typical store like in the West, but as part of carrier-exclusive internet services. This means, just like console exclusives, some mobile games could only be accessed if you had a specific phone provider. The first, most popular, and most famous of these was NTT Docomo's iMode, followed by services like AO's EasyWeb and SoftBank's Yahoo Keitai. The mobile phone market in Japan was years ahead of us in the West, taking advantage of technologies that we wouldn't see become the standard for several years. Whilst we were making use of WAP, or Wireless Application Protocol, allowing for interactive data services, Japan's IP-based systems offered substantially stronger opportunities. And while most games still used Java, some were even programmed in the more performant C++ language. Because of the relatively fast speeds that Japanese mobile data carriers offered, not only could the size of games be expanded, but games could even be streamed to the phone from a server, allowing for data to be downloaded to the phone when it was needed, negating some of the hardware storage limitations of the time. In addition to downloadable games, there were even Flash-style browser games, something we're only just starting to see on smartphones. Of note, there are games from beloved franchises that many won't even know exist, despite being huge fans of the series they're attached to. While we can't list every game available, we thought we'd give a brief look at some notable Japan-exclusive titles. The cult classic Katamari series received not just one, not just two, but three feature phone games. Katamari Damacy-kun and Oe Katamari Damacy-kun were 2D side-scrolling versions of the Katamari you know and love, though no footage of them survives. Perhaps even more impressive, though, is Katamari Damacy Mobile. Later ported to iOS as I Love Katamari, this full-fledged 3D Katamari roll-em-up actually started on the humble feature phone. Not only are many of the original game's 3D assets adapted to work with the limited hardware, but the soundtrack was downmixed to work with the system as well. The game uses technology called Gestatech iMobile, allowing phones to detect tilt and movement of the phone through its camera, meaning the player moves the Katamari by tilting their phone rather than using buttons. However, this is optional, and the player can simply use more traditional controls. Ni no Kuni made a huge splash in the West, with prominent animation house Studio Ghibli assisting Level 5 to create their own RPG universe. The series saw success over here with Wrath of the White Witch in 2011 for the PlayStation 3, but the series actually began with a Japanese-exclusive DS title. Dominion of the Dark Djinn played pretty differently to the full console release, but there was also another even lesser known game in the series that saw an exclusive release in Japan for mobile devices. Ni no Kuni Hot Troit Stories released on the same day as the DS Ni no Kuni, and acts as a precursor to the story of the original game. In a graphical style reminiscent of Earthbound, the player follows Oliver and his friend Mark as they work to build their own custom car made out of automobile parts found through the town of Hottroit. They are joined by a cat who adventures with them whilst taking out various creatures in a turn-based RPG battle system. Unlike the main Ni no Kuni titles, which feature magical attacks, characters instead use various real-world items to attack in a similar vein, such as dry ice instead of casting an ice spell. Originally, the game was planned to release episodically, but since the first chapter was released in 2010, no more chapters have followed. While Mega Man Legends is better recognized as a Mega Man spin-off series with only a few games under the moniker, and a third entry for the 3DS that was cancelled to the dismay of the huge fanbase of the series, there was actually a complete pocket-sized adventure created for Japanese feature phones. It isn't quite as expansive as what had come before, and what could have been, but it boasted some impressive gameplay for such a limited device. Rockman Dash: Great Adventure on the Five Islands, released in 2008, just a few years before Legends 3 was demonstrated. It saw Mega Man exploring 5 islands, each with several areas, as he sought to find treasure and uncover the secrets to each location. Another series in the Mega Man franchise was Battle Network, which ultimately encompassed a huge number of games across multiple consoles, and even its own anime series. This series of 2 mobile games, the 2004 Phantom of Network and the 2006 Legend of Network, played like the original Game Boy Advance titles. While the real-world areas were relegated to simple menu selections, the main core of the game was kept intact. It saw Lan and Mega Man work to reduce the onslaught of digital crime carried out in the now ever-connected world of technology, where most appliances can now be accessed via the net. It was released in chapters every fortnight, for a total of 8 chapters in all. While many classic characters would make a reappearance, the games featured unique characters exclusively designed for these entries, such as Nobody, Rideman Exe, Cherise, and Trojan Horse. Though there is no footage available online, Persona had a game released for feature phones that actually acted as an MMORPG, involving the player's custom-made avatar as a student in Yamori High School. Persona Mobile Online involved interacting with other players, trying to rid shadows from the school. The lack of information about this game only serves to highlight how important preservation is for these Japan-exclusive mobile titles. Remember Crisis Core, the PSP prequel to Final Fantasy VII? That game was originally going to be a port of the iMode game Before Crisis Final Fantasy VII, but took on an identity of its own during development. Before Crisis is an action RPG that takes place alongside Crisis Core, and like that game, it flips the script on Final Fantasy VII. It centers on a group of 11 playable members of the Turks, Shinra's elite corps, who are on a mission to fight the eco-terrorist group Avalanche, the same Avalanche you start as a member of in Final Fantasy VII. On its launch day in 2004, Before Crisis garnered a whopping 200,000 users, reportedly making it the best-selling mobile game ever at the time. These games we've mentioned are but a few examples. The libraries of iMode and Japan's other feature phone platforms are nigh endless. There's a Gundam Mystery Dungeon game, a 2.5D Adventure Island, a Twin Bee roguelike, a Bomberman action RPG, an ungodly amount of Sonic titles, an honest-to-god mobile port of the marble-rolling Wii game Kororimpa, several Persona 3 spin-offs, a Gregory Horror Show adventure game, a Guitaru Man virtual pet title, not one, but 2 Professor Layton social games, an inexplicable first-person sequel to the 1983 arcade classic Elevator Action, and of course, innumerable original exclusives. The list goes on and on. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more about those. Now here's where we explain the bad part of this whole situation. Because of the way that iMode and similar services work, it's likely that many games from within this market are going to disappear forever. The only means of obtaining these games is from a contract phone plan, requiring you to be in Japan to sign up for a compatible plan. It could be possible for somebody dedicated to archiving video games to move to Japan, subscribe to an iMode service plan, download every game, and work out some means of preserving the data, except Docomo, the creators of the iMode service, stopped offering new iMode plans in September of 2019. And not just that, but they've also announced that the whole service will be shut down permanently in 2026, at which point every game created for the platform will become lost gaming history. While it is still technically possible to sign up for an easy web phone plan, the feature allowing for the download of apps has been closed entirely. This means that it's already the case that all the games on the EasyWeb platform have been lost to the sands of time. Because of stigmas surrounding video game preservation in Japan, with it often being seen as a glorified form of piracy, it's hard to find anybody willing to dedicate themselves to the cause of archiving these games. Not only would somebody now need to hold an already existing, relatively outdated phone plan from prior to 2019, they would also need to be in the country to get reception and have the financial means to purchase countless games. As if that weren't enough, the technological side is under-researched, and methods for extracting and emulating these apps range from nascent to non-existent. That's an especially tall task given that, again, many titles will stream data to the phone during gameplay and not simply download all of the game from the offset. We've seen entirely digital markets come under threat in more recent times, with the Wii and DSi digital stores closing, and Sony having announced the closure of the PlayStation Network store for the PSP, PS Vita, and PlayStation 3. Every digital exclusive Wii and DSi game was preserved only thanks to the efforts of enthusiasts, and Sony later reversed their decision thanks to widespread online backlash. However, Nintendo and Sony hosted games for a mainstream video game-centric console. The old redundant hardware of mobile phones, which weren't designed just for gaming, doesn't have many backing its corner. And as it stands today, that is the state of iMode and the feature phone gaming market at large. It's slowly disappearing, and because the old mobile market isn't considered to be a mainstream entertainment platform, it's flying under most people's radars, despite what could be seen as an enormous and influential part of video game history and culture, one that establishes the foundation of both the mobile games market and of mobile game data streaming, which is becoming a standard in the modern world. It's not often that a platform's entire library of games disappears, but the feature phone ecosystem is entirely digital. Imagine if suddenly every NES game disappeared with no ROMs, no way to experience those titles again. Due to a lack of preservation, that is where this sprawling market may wind up, as a pile of old articles and fond memories. It requires the dedicated work of preservationists to prevent the eradication of these games. In fact, one Discord-based feature phone preservationist collective, CaviBreak, is making great headway. But they can only do so much. EasyWeb was snuffed out in 2018. At this stage, the only means of getting games exclusive to that platform is through purchasing second-hand handsets through Yahoo auctions and hoping that there may be a game already preloaded. A process that is not only prohibitively expensive, but also unlikely to yield many results. In a post-2026 world, this bleak place is where iMode preservation will find itself as well, unless people work together to archive these titles for future reference. Many will consider the venture of preserving these games perhaps a wasted effort, considering their position as fairly simple games created for a disposable gaming market only formed as a result of the ever-expanding uptake of mobile phones. But the reality is, it's a culture rife with creativity and inspirational concepts, and in the future, it could be seen as the basis for the standard under which many games operate. One company in Japan, Gmode, has actually made efforts to preserve the various mobile games that were popular with their audience in the country. They have, at the time of this video, re-released 40 different titles from old feature phones onto the Nintendo Switch, though there's been no effort to translate the games for international audiences. Special thanks are in order for this video. First of all, thank you to Ruwaga, who recorded many of the games seen throughout this video. He has been working to record full playthroughs of feature phone games in order to preserve them in at least a video format, and posts extremely regularly. And thanks goes out to video game preservationist, ROM hacker, and translator Samuel Obskyr Messner, who helped tremendously with the writing and research of this video. He's just released an episode of Obscuriosities, his podcast about obscure video games, and it details some of the games we couldn't get into this video, so go ahead and give it a listen. If you're interested, links to both Ruwaga and Obskyr can be found in the video description.